Do we know what this hair is doing? We do not. Hello and welcome to the Freakish Lemon video podcast. I am your host, the Freakish Lemon. I go by Adrian. I use masculine pronouns. Welcome to any new viewers. Thank you so much for clicking on whatever you clicked on to get here. And welcome back any returning viewers. Thanks for sticking with this thing that I do. This is a crafty type podcast coming to you from a land that includes parts of the Tunxus, Pagusset, and Mohican homelands in northwestern Connecticut. And this podcast episode has closed captioning and transcripts over at my website. Show notes, transcripts can all be found over at freakishlemon.com. You can follow... Nope, that's not what goes next. We also have a group on Ravelry. If you search Freakish Lemon in the groups tab, that is where you will find us. And you can follow me as Freakish Lemon on Instagram and Ravelry and here on YouTube if you'd like. All the links to these things will be in the down bar here on YouTube or around here if you're watching this somewhere else. And if you are here on YouTube, consider hitting that subscribe button if you want to follow along with what I am doing. I am filming this on Sunday, November 3rd, 2019, and we're gonna start off this podcast with a couple of festival recaps. First recap we're gonna do is the New York Sheep and Wool Festival in Rhinebeck, New York, 2019. This was 3 weeks ago now, the weekend of the 20th. I don't know the days, but it was a while back. I'm sure if you follow other crafty podcasters here on YouTube or elsewhere, you'll have heard or seen some Rhinebeck recaps before. But I don't know. I guess we all have to do it, you know? We just all gotta do it. So, my mom and I drove up on the Thursday before Rhinebeck. We drove up to Saugerties, New York, to help Gabby from Once Upon a Corgi set up her booth at Indie Untangled. Gabby from Once Upon a Corgi is my sister. Disclaimer. So we went up there first, helped her set up. Not much to say there. Gabby already had the booth and how it was going to be set up already planned, so it was basically setting up grid walls and her saying, put that there, while me and Mom put things up. We were done with the whole booth in less than an hour. People at the venue were shocked when we walked out of there with the booth all set up, except for a few things that, you know, needed to get set up day of. So we did that, and then we headed over to Rhinebeck itself and ate lunch at Bread Alone because we had some time to kill before booking into our Airbnb house that we rented with a bunch of friends. So we killed some time there, and then went and checked into the house and just kind of hung out, knit. Gabby and Sam brought their electric eel nano wheels, so there was spinning and knitting, and we just kind of chilled out. We brought food to make for dinner. Since everybody was coming in at different times, we didn't want to try to organize going out anywhere, so we brought taco and burrito fixings, and we did tacos and burritos at the house that we rented, which was a beautiful house. It was like a little vacation house. I don't think anybody has lived there full-time in a long time. It's down a long winding driveway out in the middle of the woods, picturesque. It was beautiful. We saw turkeys and deer and hawks, which was real fun for a couple of our folks who don't live in Connecticut where the wildlife is everywhere. So that was fun. And then Friday was kind of everybody figuring out where they wanted to go. There were 3 different events happening on Friday. There was Indie Untangled, which some of our house folks got tickets for, and Gabby was vending at. her fiance came up to help vend, and Samantha Guerin, who was one of our housemates, she was there kind of promoting her designs because Gabby and Sam are friends, and so they have her designs up in the booth. You can get her patterns pretty much anywhere where Gabby vends. So, so they went off to do India Untangled. A couple of folks went over to the Yarn Bazaar, which was put on by Christy Glass, and then there was Needles Up over in Kingston, New York, across the bridge. So Mom and I went to Needles Up, so we could catch up with Amanda from Classy Squid Fiber Company and just go say hi and chat to Chelsea and Sue of Legacy Fiber Arts and, you know, poke around. We didn't go into Rhinebeck having a huge list of things we needed, so there wasn't a ton we were looking for, but we were kind of beelining it for the Classy Squid booth because Classy Squid Fiber Company released a series of Harry Potter fiber things, and my mom has been determined to learn how to spin, so she needed some Harry Potter fiber things. I made 2 purchases at Classy Squid Fiber Company. I did get a Harry Potter one. I got Potions Classroom, which is a set of Rolags that are kind of dark and moody, and let's see, is this, yeah, there we go. This includes Corriedale, Merino, Penduncle Silk, Sari Silk, Cotton Neps, Firestar, Nylon, and Angelina. It's a 2-ounce grouping. And then I also bought these A Court of Thorns and Roses, Rolags. I have only read the first book, but I really like the colors on these, so I don't care what they're themed. These are the Valeris Rolags, which that glare is not great. Stop looking at my face camera. Look at the Rolags. These are Falkland Merino, Firestar, Nylon, Penduncle Silk, Sari Silk, Mohair, and Angelina. And it's 2 ounces again. I always end up buying from Classy Squid Fiber booth because, or Classy Squid Fiber Company booth, because I love how she plays with fibers and textures. So I have, in the process of spinning, quite a stash of her fibers, but I can't say no, they're so good. And I usually tend to buy them in small amounts like that, so it's not the worst stashing. And then Mom and I ate lunch in Rhinebeck over at Gabby's Cafe, which is a Mexican food place, which is really, really good. We wanted to see what was going on with the Yarn Bazaar event, so we did go over to go see what was happening, but there was a line a mile long, and it was cold and windy outside. I was getting over a cold. My mom didn't want to stand in line. We just kind of went, nope, and just went puttering around downtown Rhinebeck. We went into a couple of antique stores and an art store, just poking around, seeing what was in town. Yep, that's basically what we did. We ended up picking up food. We decided to do barbecue from Smoky Rock Barbecue there in Rhinebeck, and we decided to do a pickup order, so we just killed time until it was time to get food. So we got our pickup order, we headed back to the rental house, brought everybody their dinner, and then stayed up way too late. Which is as you do when you stay with friends at these fiber festivals. It's just staying up way too late. So then Saturday was the first day of the New York Sheep and Wool Festival proper. We got into the festival fairly early. I consider before noon fairly early for the festival. And we decided to go ahead and do our must-have this thing might be gone shopping, which is what you need to do on Saturday. Saturday is if there's this thing and I want it and it might be gone, I need to get it. And that's the only shopping we do on Saturday is the might be gone stuff. So I went to the Lana Plante booth. They do natural dyeing on I think most of their bases are Rambouillet, and I specifically wanted to go to her booth for the naturally dyed yarns so that I can get some yarn for my hose for my 10th century Slytherin costume. So I bought 3 fingering weight skeins in this gray. These are all dyed with cochineal. These are all Rambouillet. These are 500 yard skeins, which is impressive. I bought 3 because I have no idea what kind of yardage I need, and I also don't know how long the hose need to be. I haven't decided whether they're just going to be to the knee or if they're going to go further up the thigh. It depends on how I figure out the construction of the undergarments for this costume. So I got my must-haves right away, and luckily they were basically right inside the gate. So did that, and then we puttered around and got pretzels for lunch, because that's what we do for lunch at Rhinebeck on Saturday, because the food lines get very, very long. And just making sure that there wasn't anything else in there that I needed to show. So the pretzel line goes really fast because it's pretzels. And that's filling enough to kind of get us through the day until the crowds die down. And then we headed over to the hill. We got there at about 12:30, so it was still during the Ravelry meetup. But people were starting to mill over for the podcaster meetup, and we just hung out there for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. Yeah, I got to meet a couple of viewers, so hello viewers that I met at Rhinebeck, and hugged a bunch of folks, and managed to not be anxious enough to introduce myself to some other folks, which was like a milestone for me. I just went up to 3 or 4 people and was like, hey, I watch your podcast. I like your podcast. This is who I am, and this is my podcast. Well, like, without panicking and dissociating from my body, which I'm still amazed that that managed to happen. Also, if you ever get a chance to get a Gigi Made It hug, do it, because she's like a professional hugger. I got a hug before she even asked me who I was. I got to meet in person my good friend Mars from the Hey Brownberry podcast. We've talked back and forth online and sent each other packages and things. And I went and said hi to her in person, and she basically turned me around into a Gigi hug, and I was just like, oh, I did want to say hi to you, but now we're hugging. It was top-notch hug. I highly recommend. If you have the opportunity for a Gigi hug, do it. And then me and Mom ended up meandering through the rest of the barns, just getting our bearings on where things were. Not that we can ever remember where things are, but, you know, just kind of getting an idea about where things are. Then we went back to the rental house for a while, hung out, met back up with everybody, and we went out to dinner at Aroy, which is an excellent Thai place in Rhinebeck. And then went back to the house and stayed up way too late again, because that's what you do when you rent a house with friends. And then Sunday, we went back into Rhinebeck. Not everybody in our group did, because we had a couple of folks who were flying out kind of early that afternoon, which totally fine. But we packed up the car and everything, went over to Rhinebeck, and started doing our real shopping, where, you know, we had seen some things on Saturday, and we want to check it out. Did that kind of stuff. I ended up with 3 purchases. The first was Neighborhood Fiber Company. She was on my list to go buy from this year, because I have found that it is difficult to find black fingering weight yarn. And I said, if there's anybody at Rhinebeck who's going to have a straight black or, you know, black tonal fingering weight yarn, it's going to be Neighborhood Fiber Company. And they did. So I got 3 skeins of a black fingering weight yarn. This is not for any particular project in mind. I just use a lot of fingering weight black yarn. Was it last year, year before? A couple of years ago, I did a big Knit Picks order that was just black and gray yarn, and I have, I think, most of a 50-gram ball left. I went on a yarn crawl in September that I spoke about. Nobody had any black fingering weight yarn, so I was like, there's got to be some at Rhinebeck. So I just grabbed black fingering weight yarn because I need black fingering weight yarn. And it shouldn't be this difficult to find it. So, hooray for the Neighborhood Fiber Company and her sensible tonal colors. And then I also ended up with a kind of impulse purchase over at Loop Fiber Studio. I was hanging out with my mom in the Into the World booth because my mom was getting fiber for her spinning. And I was just looking over at the Loop booth, and it occurred to me that I have a chain-plied handspun made out of a loop bat that does not go with anything else in my life. And I did find out, you can tell how often I wore this shawl because I knit it into an asymmetrical triangle shawl, and I forgot that I had knit it into an asymmetrical triangle shawl. So clearly I never wear that asymmetrical triangle shawl. So I ripped out that shawl, but I had the photo of the handspun on my phone and went into the booth looking for friends to go with that loop bump. So this blue jumped out at me because it's the center blue is very similar to the blue that's in that handspun skein that I finished from Loop. So that's a nice, and this is a color that I wear all the time, so having a lot of blue would be good. And then I grabbed this other one because it had the same kind of pinky peach and the same sort of magenta purple. So this color and this purple color, which is repeated, are very similar. So I think what's going to happen is I'm going to spin these the same way as a chain ply yarn, and the 3 of them will go together either in a shawl or a sweater or something. But something where I don't just have one random skein that doesn't really go with anything else. So, impulse purchases. There's always one whenever I go to a fiber festival. Luckily I've gotten to the point where it's usually only 1 or 2 impulse purchases, but that was my impulse purchase for Rhinebeck. And then I did buy, I want to show you this tiny little felted witch mouse, which is adorable. I just couldn't handle it. This booth had a bunch of little witch mice. It took all of my willpower not to walk out with like 5 of these. But that's going up on the shelf over there somewhere. So that's exciting. And yeah, that was Sunday. It started raining in the afternoon, so we kind of packed it up once it started raining, and headed out, said goodbye to all of our housemates and everybody, and headed on out. And that was Rhinebeck. It simultaneously feels like years ago and also yesterday, because time is a foolish figment of our imagination. So fast forward a couple of weeks, which brings you to this weekend, and the New England Fiber Festival was going on this weekend. At the time of filming this, it's still going on, but by the time you see this, it will have been probably a week. New England Fiber Festival is up in, I think it's technically Springfield, Massachusetts, but if you're familiar with the area, it's at the Big E Fairgrounds. And while Rhinebeck is my favorite to meet up with friends because it feels like everybody goes, New England Fiber Festival is my favorite to actually go and buy things and feel inspired about crafting. New England Fiber Festival they have yarn, they have fiber, they also have a lot of rug hooking, they have some quilting, they have interesting bag makers and pottery and ready-made like linen clothing or upcycled aprons. It's a lot of cool stuff. And even when it's busy, it doesn't feel crammed or rushed or oppressive the way sometimes Rhinebeck can feel when you're like sardined into a barn and you can't go anywhere. It's one of my favorites. So Mom and I went up yesterday, November 2nd, to do shopping. My sister, Gabby from Once Upon a Corgi, is vending there, so Jake, her fiance, took off work and was helping her vend yesterday, and my mom's actually up there today helping her vend. So we got out of the house late, because of course we did, because I was driving, and that's how life works now. I'm not on time for anything. So we head on up there, and the first thing we do is we run some errands for Gabby. We kind of intercepted her as we were coming in. She needed to go one way, but coffee for Jake needed to go another way, and I had brought batteries for some of her display things. So we went and dropped off that stuff with Jake at the booth. And then we walked around sort of the main room of the building and started making purchases. Usually we do one walkthrough and then we go through and make purchases, but we took a kind of weird meandering way around this year. So first thing I purchased were these 3 skeins of Dun Roving Yakety Yak yarn in the Prussian blue colorway. I was specifically looking for yak bases at this festival because I had bought 2 skeins of a yak base from 100 Ravens last year. They were these 2 skeins, Atherton Wing and Perennial. And I was hoping 100 Ravens would have another solid color that would go with these, but I forgot to bring my samples to match colors, and nothing in the booth for 100 Ravens was looking quite right. I knew the picture on my Ravelry account for the lighter green Atherton Wing would be fairly accurate. So when I went over into the Dun Roving yard, they had a Dun Roving yarn booth. They had a sale on this yarn. I want to say it was like 15% off or something. And I knew this blue would go with this green. But words. But I'm happy to say that all 3 of these colors actually go together, so these should be a sweater at some point, which is very exciting. Just throw all the things. And then while we were walking around, I did make an impulse purchase. I'm not typically in the market for project bags anymore. I have a lot of project bags, and they cover what I need them to cover. But I did walk into the Stitched by Jessa Lou booth, and she does wonderful project bags, and she had a sweater-sized project bag that is sweater-sized enough for me. And it was in this Halloween fabric, so I had to get it. I just couldn't not. Yeah, my excuse is that I only have a couple of sweater-sized bags that fit sweater quantities for my size. Especially if I'm using a thicker weight yarn. But it's a simple boxed bottom zipper bag. There's no pockets inside. It didn't come with handles or anything, but I just couldn't get over this fabric, and it's a great size for my size sweater, so I got it. And I think I've officially reached bag saturation. No more project bags, I say, hoping that I won't buy any more next year. And then we met up with some friends who had come up to New England Fiber Festival for the first time and hung out and chatted, ended up getting lunch and then chatted some more. And after we parted ways to go shopping some more, Mom and I finished our walkthrough. We went up to the front, which we had kind of skipped over, and did our annual purchase over at, oh, I've forgotten the name of the farm, but the link is in the show notes, and they have this lotion called My Daughter's Recipe. It's sold in these little tubs, and there was a deal, so we got soap too. But this lotion, I don't use it for everyday use. My mom does, because my mom's a nurse and she has to wash her hands constantly for work, so it really helps heal her hands overnight. So if you are in a hand washing intensive profession, you might want to look into it. But I like to use that for spinning. I like to lotion up my hands before I'm spinning, and this stuff kind of stays with my skin longer than other lotions I have used. Our genetics give us perpetually dry hands constantly. So, and spinning for us dries out skin anyway, because that's how spinning works, I guess. But I love using that for spinning, and I was running low on the one I've got down there in the craft room now, so I got some more of that. And then hilariously, we stumbled upon this booth for Falling Star Farm. They have Romney sheep. I bought this 5-ounce ball of Romney from a lovely sheep named Adele. And Falling Star Farm, where Adele lives, is 2 miles away from where I live. On the main road of our town. And I didn't know that this farm existed. Which, I tell you, surprise. Like, I know there are sheep farmers in my town. I just didn't know anybody was selling fleeces. Like, to that hand spinning, hand knitting crowd. But apparently, they are. So, next time I feel the urge to process a fleece, somebody remind me to just go down the street and buy one. because they're right there. And that was the last of my purchases. We ended up going back to Gabby's booth because the festival kind of really winds down in the last hour and a half. Like, the crowds thin out. So we just went back to Gabby's booth and we're hanging out with Gabby and Jake and met up with friends and hung out on the booth and sort of helped her close up the booth for the night. And that was the end of New England Fiber Festival. And that's the end of the Fiber Festival season for us. Sorry if you weren't interested in any of that. So let's move on to the actual crafting stuff. There's not a ton because I've been out and about at fiber festivals, but I do have some stuff to talk about. I've got 2 FOs to talk about. The first is I finished my granny stripe blanket. This is a pattern by Lucy of Attic 24. And I used a USG, a 4.25 millimeter hook, and this is magic balls of mini skeins and scraps held double with black Knit Pick Stroll fingering yarn, and I got a few colors into the last magic ball and decided it was time to do borders because borders take a lot more yarn than you anticipate. So I ended up doing 4 rounds of single crochet for the border, and it is done. I'm so happy to have this off the hook, because it's blanket season now. Have I washed and blocked it? No. One day I'll wash it. It's a blanket. I don't think it needs blocking particularly. I crocheted in my ends as I went, and it's got little ends poking out, but I don't care. If any of them bother me, I'll clip them later. So as far as I'm concerned, this blanket is completely finished. I just have to photograph it for my Ravelry project page, which I may have done. I gotta find out. But it is done, and I am pleased, and my mom and I have this running spreadsheet from I-91 Shop Hop through to the next I-91 Shop Hop to make sure we're hitting our goals for using stash and actually making things with our yarn. And this accounted for, I only use finished objects in the count because I can't keep track of stuff. So this accounts for almost half of the agreed amount that me and Mom decided we were gonna try to hit. So it's like a weight has come off my shoulders finishing this long-term project. It always feels like that for long-term projects, so that is awesome. And I will be napping under that later today. And then the second finished object, which was never a work in progress on here because I sewed this like a madman, is the Maker's Tote by Noodlehead. It is a zippered tote bag. I used this Ray fabric. There's dog hair all over it. I did show this on Instagram if you want to get a pretty in-depth walkthrough of how I load this bag up. This bag is for my Electric Eel Nano spinning wheel so that I can carry it around. This is a snap front pocket. There's nothing in it right now. If I were the person to take notes while spinning, I would put a little notebook in there, but I'm not, so there's nothing there. On the other side, there is a set-in zipper pocket. I used this red for the sides. This uses a separating zipper, so you can open the whole thing up Mary Poppins style. Inside there are 3 pockets here with the black. And then, ooh, here we go. On this side there are 2 red pleated pockets. And I can fit all of my spinning wheel gear, any spare gear, the spinning wheel itself, and fiber all in this bag, which is great. The only change that I made to the pattern is I added this black bit of trim here because it is a pain to sew this inside zipper and have the seam along the front of the bag, because you sew this zipper straight in, but then you have the seam here, and I could not get it to look straight, so I just covered it up with some extra black trim that I had. Part of the difficulty with this construction is the main body of this bag has this foam inside per the pattern. I will be making a second bag of this for my mom for Christmas. She requested it because she wants one for her electric EL Nano wheel. But for hers, I'm just going to use some quilt batting instead of that foam. Quilt batting won't shift as much as that foam did, and even if I do 2 layers of the quilt batting that we have here in the house, it's not going to be as thick as this foam, which made it really difficult to get seams to look nice getting through the machine, especially around these curves. Wow, lots of dog hair. I ended up hand sewing on this binding because I was not getting these curves through my machine again. The once was good enough, and I hand sewed all the binding on, just to avoid dealing with it. So I will let you know how that goes when I do this bag with the quilt batting instead of the foam. But ultimately I'm very pleased with how this bag turned out, and it's the perfect size for my Nano. And now I can bring my Nano around and spin at gatherings that I go to once a year. I'm very pleased with that. That's all I've got to say about it. So we'll go on to whips. First whip I have on my list is my Palmer Family Farm yarn ribbed socks. I believe last time I showed them to you, nearly done with the toe on this sock. Here is a sock. I finished up the toe and I cast on the next sock. So I finished the cuff. I am nearly done with the full ribbed leg, and then there's an inch with the back just stockinette, and then heel, foot, everything. This sock has been going the slowest out of all of the socks because while I usually don't have second sock syndrome, this is sock number 6 of this exact same pattern that I put together for this particular yarn. So I'm really feeling pattern fatigue on this sock. I'm hoping to finish it by the end of the year, because then I'll be done with my Palmer Family Farm stash. And I won't have to worry about it for a while. Whew. But yeah, 6th sock syndrome there. And then I have made some progress on my machine knit Redford sweater by Julie Hoover. I finished the back piece. I have compared it to this sweater. It's a little bit longer than this sweater, which is not what I was aiming for, but I'm not mad about it, and I'm not going to reknit it. So I'm just going to keep on going. So that's the back. It's very exciting in gray. This is Green Mountain Spinnery Lana in gray. And I'm using my LK150 to knit this. More information in the future when I publish the video that I'm doing about this sweater. And then the other knitting project that I'm aiming to put progress on is my Rice Fields shawl. This is a pattern by Elżbieta Torink. I'm using US 3.25 millimeter needles. I forgot to say I'm also using that same size on the Palmer Family Farm socks. I have tangled my yarns. This is a, depending on which version of the pattern you go with, either a semicircle or a half circle shawl. It is almost entirely two-color brioche. I'm using Legacy Fiber Arts Hocus Pocus colorways from a few years ago, and some Barocco Ultra Alpaca Fingering Light. So the last time I picked this up and showed you, this is not exact, but I was 1 or 2 rows into this Mary Sanderson pink color, and I have put on some inches. This takes a very long time because I'm doing 2-pass, 2-color brioche, because my brain's not at a place to learn 1-pass, 2-color brioche, and there are a lot of stitches on the needles, so it takes me a while. Yes, this shawl is a very long-term project because the stitch count gets so big, but I am very excited for the finished object, so I'm going to keep grinding away at this shawl. And that's the end of that. I have also been doing some spinning, going to Rhinebeck and seeing Sam and Gabby spinning on their Nano spinners made me want to finish up some stuff on my Nano. I finished spinning the singles for these blue, white, and black fluffs, which I call the 501st fluffs, after the 501st... Oh, I forgot the name of that particular group of soldiers. Legion? 501st Legion? They're Vader's group of stormtroopers, but prior to the end of the Clone Wars, it was his group of clones, and their colors were blue and white. So I finished those fluffs. I have now started in on... those fluffs are fluffs that I made. Nobody made them. I just named them Star Wars things because that's what I do. I started on this batch of a mixed bat that I made. I called this one House Organa because it looked like the colors of Alderaan and the colors that Bail Organa wears. So this is my first bobbin. And then I finished up a Classy Squid Fiber Company bat on my Ashford Kiwi. This is not entirely Classy Squid. There's another set of singles under here because I obsessively fill up my bobbins before I ply anything. So this is 2 ounces of the bat Quoth version 1, which has Corriedale, Romney Cross, Mulberry Silk, Firestar, Carbonized Bamboo, and Sari Silk. And I've started in on Quoth version 2, which is a darker version of this without the sparkly stuff and silk, to be plied with this on the companion bobbin. I am getting very close to filling up bobbins. It's going to be a ply party, I'll say by January. And that's it for my works in progress. I just have a little bit of other stuff I wanted to talk about. Not really watching anything, not really reading anything as of note as of yet, but I have been listening to some stuff. I kind of fell headfirst into the Raven Cycle by Maggie Steeves Fodder, and the audiobooks are narrated by Will Patton. The books are as follows: The Raven Boys, Dream Thieves, Blue Lily Lily Blue, and The Raven King. And I went through all 4 of those books in a week and a half. And I've been reading fanfic ever since then, so that is really exciting that my brain is just excited about diving into a new fandom, because that hasn't happened in a while. I've been returning to old fandoms recently, but new fandom is exciting. And I have been steadily making it through the Inheritance Cycle series by Christopher Paolini. I've talked about listening to Aragon and Eldest on this podcast before. I am very close to finishing Brissinger. Brissinger has been the longest book out of all the books thus far. I feel like I was at 20 hours of audiobook for a million years. But I'm finally, like, within... I must be close to only 3 hours left now. And it's due tomorrow back at the library. Well, on the library app. So, I'm gonna finish that today, but it has been a wild ride. And I'm a little bit annoyed with myself that I didn't read this back when it was coming out. Because I'd read Aragon and Eldest, and then I just fell off. But this one was really good, and so much more happens in Brissinger alone than the entire Chronicles of Narnia. It is jam-packed with all sorts of fun stuff. Highly recommend if you're into fantasy and also dragons. Yeah. And that's going to do it for this episode. So we're going to sign off. Show notes and links to everything and transcript is over at freakishlemon.com. Come join us over in the Ravelry group at just search Freakish Lemon in the groups tab on Ravelry. You'll find me. You can follow me as Freakish Lemon on Instagram and Ravelry if you like. Links to these things will be in the down bar here on YouTube or around here if you're watching this somewhere else. And if you want to find out when I post my next video, consider hitting that subscribe button here on YouTube to follow along with this thing that I do. And that's gonna do it from me. Goodbye.